My favorite author of all time would have to be George Orwell. It's funny because most of his books were pretty depressing. His essays generally had a negative ring to them. His magnum opus, 1984, was perhaps one of the most depressing novels of all time. But I think that his essential message was civilization and humanity is something that's worth preserving. It's hard to define what civilization and humanity are. It's hard to define what it means to be a decent person. But we all know what it is, and it's worth standing up and being counted when that state of affairs, what we call common decency, is threatened. I wonder what George Orwell would make, actually, of the present situation in Europe vis-a-vis the tensions inherent in the changing demographics of Europe. A lot of Europeans are uneasy about the mass migration of non-Europeans to Europe, particularly Muslims. Unfortunately, for better or for worse, in most European countries, non-Muslims are seen as assimilable. Black Africans who are Catholics are generally seen as French people in France. Hindu people in Britain are generally seen as harmless immigrants who are, industrious and likely to do their adopted country proud. But Muslim people are seen in many quarters as a menace. I wonder what Orwell would make of all of this. He wrote extensively in works like The Road to Wigan Pier, or Keep the Aspidistra Flying, or Homage to Catalonia, about class hatred, which is something that may not be as prevalent today as it was in his day. I lived in England for 6 months and in 1991, and even I was conscious of how class-ridden European or British society is, but I don't think it's all that different from European society in general. It's a very hierarchical society. Even though I was in Newcastle upon Tyne, which is probably the most the British city that's probably the most free of this kind of thing. Even there, as a foreigner, I could see evidence of this kind of thinking in people, and a class-ridden society from both ends of the spectrum, from the lower class point of view and the upper class point of view. I must confess I had little to do with the upper class point of view, but it was apparent that the lower class did not exactly admire the upper class, I'll put it that way. So this tendency seems to be decreasing in Western society. But Western society doesn't seem any less fragmented than it's ever been. Now it's not a case of class, it's becoming a case of race. We can put whatever value judgments we want on the mass migration of people, but the simple fact is there are millions and millions of people in the poorer bits of the world that want to migrate to the richer bits of the world. We can deal with that in one of two ways. We can like it or we can lump it. I think Orwell would have seen the whole thing as something more or less inevitable. And the best thing that we can do is manage the process. We can just sort of say, okay, does the host or the receiving society, the West or Europe or Western civilization itself, have legitimate concerns? Yes, they do, because they live in a liberal, humanist kind of society where individualism is important. and they don't like the social conservatism of, say, Islamic immigrants. This bothers them. It bothers them, and it's not something that they can get used to. So there are legitimate concerns there. By the same token, do the immigrants who are likely to migrate to Europe or to North America have legitimate concerns themselves? Look, we're willing to uproot our entire lives, move to the West, work our behinds off to make a new life for ourselves. But no matter what we do, we are still despised. So, in a sense, they have legitimate concerns. Orwell, I think, would have seen both sides. I think that he would have said, okay, white man or Western man, I don't blame you for being worried about where all this is going, and I don't blame you for questioning things like the burqa or Sharia or whatever. But he also probably would have said, listen, these people are here. They're coming here to do the kind of work that maybe you don't want to do, or maybe their presence in our society, in our civilization, will be an economic benefit to you. He doesn't mind doing jobs that you might not like. Maybe his children will see things differently. Will demand to be a lawyer or a professional of some sort. But he has legitimate concerns. He wants to become just like you, but the problem is he doesn't look like you. And that may be held against him by the host society. So maybe you should do a little bit of self-examining. And maybe it's not the end of the world if his daughters wear a hijab, or he happens to have a funny, unpronounceable name. I don't think that it's likely to cause society to fragment. There are two sides to this equation. The host country and the new arrivals both have to make adjustments in order for it to work. But again, I think that if Orwell were alive today, that's one of the essays he would have written. Thank you.